Oil, absolutely vital for the world economy, but we've seen a lot of changes in prices recently. We'll be looking at the different aspects from crude oil all the way down to the different petroleum products and the different uses. Today we're looking at oil, and so we'll start off by having a look at crude oil. Now, the production of crude oil has changed an awful lot in the last couple of years. We had for many years, crude oil was mainly produced in the Middle East, and so this was the major source of production. In 2014, the United States actually became the largest producer of crude oil in the world due to a lot of the new supplies that were coming online there. Now, going back to the Middle East and the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, they control 81% of the world's proven resources of crude oil, and so they have an incredible power when it comes to the market prices. Now, as I said, the different centers of production are changing rapidly at the moment as the price fluctuates. With price being very high as it was over the last couple of years, we saw a lot of new productions coming online, and so we saw a lot of energy being put into production coming out of West Africa, coming out of South America, and obviously in the United States. Now, with the prices that we're seeing, which are quite depressed, then we're seeing that in fact OPEC and particularly Saudi Arabia are keeping the production up very high in order to keep the prices down so that they can try to push some of the higher cost producers out of the market. And so these things are changing very rapidly as we're watching them. Now, crude oil will be transported to a refinery, and in that refinery it will then be broken down into many different constituent parts. And so we have a lot of different products which are created, all the way from petrol to different types of jet fuel to LPG to kerosene and all the different uses. So the main use, as I said, is petrol. The petrol that we use at the petrol pump to put into our cars, and this is close to about half of crude goes into petroleum, which is used for cars. Otherwise, this is a list of just some of the more than 6,000 different products which are created from petroleum. And so it is something that we find in so many aspects of our daily life. Otherwise, if we're going to look at oil, we have to look at the prices. And so we're talking an awful lot about the prices. We're talking about how low the prices are at the moment. And we can see from this graph, if we're looking back over the prices of crude oil over the last 10 years or so, we can see that the prices that we have today are relatively depressed. And so we had prices in 2007, end of 2007, 2008, which were quite high, dipped slightly when the crisis hit, but then they came up, and we got used to prices over $100 per barrel, but now it's slipped back down again. Now, one thing that's important to notice is when we're talking about the price of oil, we always talk about price of oil per barrel. We're talking about, is it $40 per barrel? Is it $100 per barrel? But this, we're talking about crude oil. And so obviously all the other products, all the different petroleum products which are created from crude, have their own prices which fluctuate in function of their supply and demand. Now, in terms of these prices we can see over the last 10 years, yes, it looks like we're actually looking at some very low prices today, here in December of 2015. But if we were to look back a little bit further in time, and if we look at the last 20 years or so of prices, we'll see that in fact it was the last 10 years which was unusual. The prices we're seeing at the moment are much closer to what we saw over the past. So otherwise, in terms of transportation, we have many different forms of transportation. Crude oil is often transported by pipeline, and so it will be transported from the area of production across a large mass of land to the refinery where it will be processed. We also have transportation by trucks, often to deliver to the petrol stations. We have transportation by train. Again, this is when we are traveling across large land masses. There's an awful lot in Russia, for example, also in North America. There's a lot transported by train, and otherwise vast quantities are transported by vessel. And so tankers, we've looked at it before, and we have sizes of tankers from the very small tankers, which can carry 500 metric tons or so, which are purely coastal, all the way up to the ultra large crude carriers, which can carry up to 500,000 tons of crude oil. So otherwise, in terms of oil itself, we have to look at the risks. So risk, first of all, pollution. We cannot ignore it, and so there are an awful lot of steps which are taken in order to minimize the risk of pollution. This is from making sure that pipelines are well cleaned, well maintained, making sure that vessels are in good conditions. The vessels have become double hull. Also within ports, there are a lot more procedures that have been put in place, and all the oil majors have very, very intense vetting programs. Otherwise, we have to be careful about the temperature of the oil when we're transporting it. Some of the petroleum products, if the temperature goes below a certain level, then we have a risk of it solidifying and we wouldn't be able to pump it out. Otherwise, we have risks of contamination. Contamination, basically every single type of petroleum product will have a certain set of specifications, and if there is something negative that is entered into the petroleum product, then this can change the specification and suddenly it is no longer worth any money. Jet fuel is a very good example of this. If we end up with particles in the jet fuel, then this can cause an awful lot of problems, because obviously jet fuel is used for powering jet planes, and if there are particles which block the supply, then the plane can be in a lot of trouble. Otherwise, hedging. Hedging is very, very important because of the price fluctuations. The price fluctuations being so large that if we don't hedge, then just from one simple price fluctuation, we can end up losing an awful lot of money. So there's a lot of things to look at when we're looking at crude and different types of oil. In future episodes, we're going to be looking into the specific petroleum products themselves. This has been Commodity Brief in partnership with Dukescopy TV. I'm Richard Watts. Thank you for watching. Please click back for future episodes.